Hello everyone. In this video, I want to talk about reading, specifically how to read more if you want to increase your reading. And I kind of want to talk about this because when I talk about how much I read or when I reveal how much I read, people look at me kind of weird, and I think people must think that I spend all my time reading or that somehow I'm an absolute outlier, which statistically I probably am an outlier. But people wonder, how do you read that much? How are you able to read that much? And maybe I want to read more. How can I read more? And I just wanted to share a couple little tips and tricks that I found, just all from personal experience and things that maybe you can do. So in 2020, as of today, which is November 22nd, I have finished 166 books. My stretch goal for the year is 250 books. However, 166 is plenty good. I think I've done quite a good job this year with reading. However, I don't think I have done extraordinarily long stretches of reading. I don't think I am completely spending every second of my free time reading. I think I've just done a lot of little habits throughout my life that has led to me being able to read 166 books in 2020 while still maintaining some semblance of life balance. I'll say some semblance because 2020 has been wild, and who has any sense of life balance right now? Certainly not me, certainly not many people. So I'm just going to share some tips, tricks, ideas in case you want to increase it, but I will say that reading is not a race or a competition. So I am on Goodreads and I follow quite a number of other people, and I see people who read way more than me and are reading hundreds of books, up to like 500, 600, 800, people who read much, much more than I do. There's also people who might only set a goal to read 20 books an entire year, and both of them are fine. I don't want to come out here and say, if you're not reading more than 100 books in 2020, you're not a good reader. It's entirely personal preference, and I'm actually going to get to that. But I know a lot of people do want to read more and maybe want a few tips and tricks from someone who does read a little bit more on how to read more. So the first thing I want to get out of the way is there are some things in my life that are in my personal circumstances that do contribute to my ability to read more. So in particular, I am not married and I don't have any kids. So even though I work full-time, I work 40 hours a week in a job, I don't have any other demands on my time. Basically, the only thing I have to do is go to work and do all those little chores like can't speak, grocery shop, laundry, uh, vacuuming the house. But I also am renting right now, so I don't have deep maintenance. I don't have to retile my bathroom. I'm also not driving kids back and forth from school. I'm not having to factor in someone else's life schedule around mine. So I'm much more able to schedule out all hours of my day in a way that I want outside of work than someone who maybe has more demands on their time. So I do want to put that out there, that most of my time is my own and I don't have a lot of those outside restrictions right now, so I'm probably able to read a lot more now than I might in the future were I to get a spouse or have children. So I do want to put that out there, that I recognize that other people have other restrictions on their time that I just don't. And I want to make sure that's very clear, that I recognize other people might not be able to spend or structure their day the way I do with every hour outside of work, because they just have other things they have to do in that time. So the first tip I would recommend is knowing what you like to read. But I really think that this comes with time. So I have been a lifelong reader. I have been going to the library for as long as I can remember. We went to the library once a week as kids, and I have basically continued except for one stretch of my life, which I will talk about later. So knowing what you like to read comes with time. I do think it's very important to try new things. It's very mind stretching. It expands your horizons when you try new things. And I'm also a big fan of not judging a book by its cover. Might not you might be pleasantly surprised by a book that you thought you might hate, but actually you kind of enjoyed. But I think the more you read, the more you really develop a feel for things that you like, and you just gravitate towards things. You might, and I do highly recommend, maybe once or twice a month, picking up a book outside your comfort zone, just to try it, just to try the waters. But then I would also say, if you're reading it, you get 30% in, you're not really feeling it, don't feel bad putting it down. putting it aside, returning it to the library, giving it away, donating it. You don't have to finish books you don't like. And while I do think it's important to try new things, I think developing your own personal sense of reading will help you better select books that you enjoy. For example, I rate most of my books 3 stars and above, and that's not because there aren't lots of books that I don't enjoy out there, and it's not because I just love every book I read. It's because if a book is going to be 1 star, I probably stop reading it right away. But also, I don't tend to check out books from the library that will have 1 or 2 stars. I tend to know my reading style and know when I'm looking at a book, oh, this is a genre that I don't typically enjoy. For example, I don't like anything that's going to be excessively bloody or violent. And if I'm reading the back of a cover or if I'm reading a review for a book and I see, wow, there's a lot of gore in this book, I'm not going to check it out unless there's other redeeming qualities for me that might interest me. So I won't check it out, and as a result, I won't be reading stuff I dislike. And I'll be much more interested in the stuff that I do check out. Another example would be the romance genre. I do not like romance when it is the only thing in a book, or I very rarely like it. There have been exceptions, and maybe if I think a book will be an exception or someone recommends it, I'll give it a try. But I'm not going to go to the library and check out 6 romance novels and then try to force myself to read them, because I'm not going to enjoy it and I'm going to avoid reading it because I don't like what I'm reading. So the more you know what you like, the better you get at picking books and the more interested you are and the more you desire to read the books that you do have. However, I will say this tip is something that just has to be developed with time. I don't think if you have read very little in the past or haven't read at all, you can't just go into reading and say, well, I like X, Y, and Z, or I think I like X, Y, and Z, so that's all I'm going to read. I do think it's important to try new things, but the more you read, the more you start to develop your personal taste, and typically the fewer and fewer books that aren't really your style you try to read, which I think leads to more reading because you're just more interested in what the books that you have. The second tip I have is to make a space in your house, your apartment, anything for reading. So I have a chair that I actually set up. I have a little nightstand. You can see it right here, right here. I have a couple books on it. I have a little, what do you call it? Something to set your mug on. And a little chair and a blanket, and I have a light there, and I can just sit there and I read. Especially at night, I like to sit in my chair. It's my reading chair. It's my chair for reading in. I also have everything set up out in my living room for reading on the couch. I can just turn on a light or I can open the window. I have everything set up right for me, and those are my reading spots. And I think that's especially useful if you want to carve out like 30 minutes in the evening, especially for reading, because having a schedule and a space to read can be really helpful. If you say every night before I go to bed I want to read for 30 minutes, going to your reading spot and then reading in the reading spot will help you develop that habit. Also, I would say when you're in your reading spot, turn off your phone. It's very cliche, or if you don't turn it off, I don't turn off my phone ever, but I do leave it in my other room or completely out of reach and I turn it over. I don't want to see the notifications. I don't want to know what anybody is doing. I don't want to see it. I don't want it within arm reach. And the only time I pick up my phone when reading is if I want to check up a fact. So if someone mentions a fact and I'm like, oh, I want to learn more about it, I might say, okay, when I get to the end of this chapter, I'm going to Google it on my phone. But that is it. I do not check it. I'm not checking my email. I'm not looking at notifications when I come in. And I think it's easier to not check the notification if I never know the notification has come in. So if I don't know my friend has texted me, I don't have to pick up my phone to see that. And that's something I think that's a muscle you build over time, which I definitely all of us could probably get better at, not checking our phone, but just keeping it out of reach and out of sight. And oh, I don't have sound on my phone. I don't have sound notifications. My phone is silenced at all times. But if you do have sound, turn the sound off too, because then you won't hear it go ding, and you won't feel compelled to check it to see who's texting you at that time. Obviously, this also, if you have maybe someone that you need to be in constant contact with for some reason, maybe like if you have a kid or something, and this is where my personal circumstances come in, maybe you can set work with your settings so only some notifications come through from the people you really need to be in contact with. Maybe set so family or a very, very close friend can get in contact with you, but you don't need every push notification coming through while you're reading, because that's going to interrupt your flow of reading. And I find when I can fall into reading, if that makes sense, when I can fully get absorbed in the book, I'm going to read a lot more and I'm going to read for a lot longer. So the other thing I would say, and this kind of goes along with the phone, but kind of goes against what I was talking about before. So I guess I'm going to start by saying, in my previous tip, making a space and making time for it is very important. But I think one thing that I've done is, and I'm still working on getting better on this, but we'll start here. So when I was in high school, I did not own a phone. I did not have my phone. And anytime I was bored, that was if I was in a waiting room at a doctor's office or a dentist office or in the Secretary of State's office, or if I was in a line. I remember waiting in a line at some college event to pick up my graduation stuff, and it was just this massive line that I had to wait in. If I'm on hold on my phone, on a phone call, like with the doctor's office or wherever, you're on hold for forever everywhere, or before bed late at night or early in the morning, those little pockets of time we have throughout our day that most of us tend to reach for our phone. When I was in high school, I didn't have a phone, so I reached for my book. I almost always had a book with me at any given time, and we're talking grocery store lines, doctor office waiting rooms, waiting in the car while someone's running into the grocery store to get something. Instead of reaching for my phone, which I didn't have, I would reach for a book and I could get a little bit more done in. Now this, I will say, can be a little harder if you're reading a book that you really need to become engrossed in, or maybe you're taking notes on because you really want to absorb the deep, heavy material. But if you just have a lighter book, maybe comedy, maybe a romance novel, maybe a sci-fi that isn't really deep, but it's just space action. I'm a fan of space action. I love battles in space. Maybe a comic book, maybe manga, whatever. If you have one of those kinds of books on hand all the time and you can just read it in those pockets of time, that's making time throughout the day. So you can still set aside that 30-minute section of time or that hour in the evening to read. But if you make those pockets of time throughout the day, and instead of reaching for your phone, you just have a book on hand, you can get quite a bit more done than you think you can in those little time. For example, well, not for example, I'll just put this out there. iPhone, at least I know, will give you a notification at the end of the week telling you your average amount of time spent on your phone during the week. And I think most of us would admit that it's quite a bit longer than we'd like it to be. So think of if you could cut down that time to maybe half, if you spent half that amount of time on your phone, which I know there's plenty of things that we have to do on our phone. I check my email on my phone, I do a lot of Googling on my phone. I use Duolingo, so I do that every day on my phone. So there's plenty of uses to get your phone out, but if you could have your phone time and just spend the other half of that time reading books and all those little times of the day when you just pull out your phone because you're bored and you have a little bit of time to kill, you could probably get through quite a bit more work. And by work, I mean reading. I'm just having a coughing fit. The next thing I'm going to say is following your mental lead. So there have been times in 2020, weeks at a time, where I've just been not in the mood to read, where nothing sounds interesting, I'd rather do other hobbies, I don't have time, and I don't want to read, I don't desire to read. And I would just say listening to your body, if that makes sense, more your brain telling you, I don't want to read. If you force yourself to read when you don't want to read, it's going to become a chore. It's not going to become enjoyable, and you're going to dread it, and it's just going to be something to check off your to-do list. Where if it becomes enjoyable and you only do it when you want to do it, it's going to be much easier to read. I will say though that starting a habit can be difficult at first because you have that resistance, because you haven't been doing it and now you need to start doing it. You need to get past that resistance and you need to want to do it. So you need to have the internal willpower and maybe the habits behind reading before you start saying, oh no, I don't feel like reading. Because picking up your phone or watching a show on Netflix, or you're tuning into the TV, is always going to be easier than picking up a book and reading. Picking up a book and reading, you have a lot of resistance internally you have to overcome. But once you have the habits and once you have the willpower, and especially when you really want to read more, it becomes easier, and that's when you start to listen to yourself and say, oh, I'm not really feeling like reading today, even though I have this book that I want to read. I'm going to read tomorrow, or I'm going to try to read later in the day, or right now I just really want to get outside. That's a big one for me in the summer when it's nice outside, because it's not nice outside all year round where I live. When it is nice outside, I very much want to be outside. I would love to spend Saturday and Sunday completely outside, and I don't want to be reading as much. Well, in the winter, when I do not prefer to be outside, I'm much more happier to read a lot more inside. So just listening to your subtle cues and following what you prefer without going down the route of, oh, I don't want to read because picking up my phone's easier, is one little trick you can do to increase your reading. The big one that I have done, which I probably read 20 or 30 books this way doing this, is audiobooks. So anytime I'm in the car for longer than like 15 minutes, well, probably longer than 5 minutes actually, and anytime I'm walking. So in the summer, especially, I walk for 2 hours every day, 5 days a week. All that time I spend listening to audiobooks. Now, one thing I will say about audiobooks for myself is that I find it less easy to retain all the facts from a book that I haven't read. And I think that has to do with the kind of learner I am. Other people are audio listening type learners, and listening is one way they can really learn it. I am not. I have to see it in order to learn it very well. However, I can still remember stuff when it's spoken to me. It's just not the best way for me to retain it. So I tend to not read books that I suspect I'm going to really enjoy, or that are so complicated that I think I'm going to want to take notes on it. I prefer to read those or check those out. But just having one or two interesting books that are full of fun facts, or are a fun story to follow along with, I definitely have, and I'm listening to them in the car, and I'm listening to them for 2 hours, 5 days a week. You can get through quite a bit of material that way. And my audiobooks are free through my public library. So if you do have a public library, I really recommend seeing if they have audiobooks or ebooks, because that's another way to increase your reading time. For example, I can't read while I'm walking with a physical book. Well, I could, but I might walk into people or walk off the trail, and that would look kind of weird. But just popping in the earbuds and listening to an audiobook looks completely normal, and I'm able to get a lot more reading done. Also in the car, I can't read a physical book while I'm in a car, and no one should read a physical book while they are driving a car. But I can listen to an audiobook on the radio. I will say, wow, I will say too, since listening to audiobooks in the car, I have no frustration when I run into construction on the road, unless I'm trying to make an appointment. But if I'm just driving between cities, oh good, construction, more time to listen to my audiobook. Completely eliminated frustration in the car. Or if I'm stuck behind a slow driver, awesome, more time to listen to my audiobook. The frustration has been completely eliminated because the time in the car now has something very entertaining tied to it. The last thing I'm going to talk about is endurance and focus, and how I believe we probably have to build that up. And I say we believe because I have heard other people talk about this. I do not have a scientific study I can link you to, although I will probably try to read some stuff on this because I have a strong suspicion that this is correct. And that is, you have to build focus when reading, and you have to build endurance when reading. So there was a time in my life where I didn't read very much, and this is coming from someone who's currently read 166 books this year, and that is not an uncommon number for me to read in a year. And that was college. When I was in college, I did not read for fun. I read because I had to read for school. I was the person who did all the mandatory readings and all the supplementary readings, and I took very good notes on them. But after I was done doing all that reading for the day, I was done reading. I was following my body. My body said, okay, we've read for 6 hours today. I do not want to read anymore. Let's do something else. So I did almost no reading for fun during college. And that was 4 or 5 years of, we'll say 5, because after college then I was looking for a job. So there was a large chunk of time where I didn't really engage in very many hobbies because I was totally focused on finding a full-time job. And while I was reading, it was a very academic reading and it felt like work, so there was no reading for fun. And then when I was looking for a job, I completely stopped reading. Also, I should say that while I was reading for college, I also did my degree in math, so I spent a lot of time doing problems, and doing a lot of math-based things. So it wasn't like I did a degree in literature or anything like that that caused me to do a lot of that kind of reading. Most of my work was around math and stuff like that. And then again, I had that stretch after school where I was looking for a full-time job, and then I found a full-time job, and then I wound up moving to a new area, and then that takes quite a bit of time to move, to get set up, and then all the little things. Where's the best grocery store? Where's the best gas station? How do I get around? What are the names of all the streets? And I started a new full-time job, so I had to adjust to the work culture. You have to figure out how to do your job because you have to get trained in it. So there was quite a bit of time where I didn't read, and then when I started reading for fun again, I noticed I had to build up my endurance or my focus, and I couldn't read for quite as long when I first started reading after not having read for fun for quite a while. And I've heard other people say that, where you really have to build up that endurance over time and that focus over time. Instead of interrupting your reading with like picking up your phone or only reading for like 5 minutes, you can slowly build up to where you can read for 2 or 3 hours at a given time without needing to take a break to do something else. However, you have to build up to that, and it's very unrealistic to expect you to be able to do that right away. And I will say, as someone who read a lot as a kid and as a teenager, all the way right up until I graduated high school and then took that time off for college and looking for a new job, where I didn't really read for fun that much. It was almost frustrating when I went back because, and I think some of this is my brain thought, oh yeah, reading is work. Because for 4 years, reading was work and it was not fun. It was just for work. It was just for college, just for my job at the time. So reading for fun, my brain had had that connection for quite a while, and it was difficult to get that back, and I would be frustrated with myself because I remember being able to read for like 6 hours at a time on rainy summer days as a teenager, and I just couldn't do it anymore, and I had to build that back up. So I think being realistic with yourself, setting realistic expectations, and not pushing yourself to do something that you can't, but also knowing that you can increase your focus and your endurance is very important. So maybe if you can read 15 minutes comfortably, read 15 minutes daily for a couple weeks, and then increase it to 20, and then increase it to 25. And slowly but surely you'll start to increase that endurance and focus, and you'll be able to read for longer and for more time. So those are just some tips and some things about that I found about reading and how to read more. At the end of the day, if you're reading, if it's been 5 books or if it's been 500 books, that's great. That's wonderful. I know many people do not read any books in an entire year, so reading shouldn't be a competition, and I don't want this to come across as you need to be reading more. This is only if you want to be reading more. These are some ticks, ticks, not ticks. I don't like ticks. Trips, it's not trips either. Tricks and tips to help you read more. So I hope you found this helpful, and if you have anything else to share, feel free to share it, because I would like to always read more as well. Probably not too much more, but I'd like to increase it and just become a better reader overall. So if you have any tricks and tips, I would love to hear it. Have a great day.